Welcome to Good Faith Reads. I'm your host, Cliff Vaughn of Good Faith Media. Good Faith Reads is a short podcast featuring our book authors. We invite you to browse our books and buy at goodfaithmedia.org/bookstore. Today's guest is Paul Wallace, author of 35 Questions Christians Ask Scientists. He's joining us remotely from Decatur, Georgia. Paul, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much, Cliff.
I want folks to know up front that you hold a PhD in physics from Duke and a Master of Divinity from Emory's Candler School of Theology. So in addition to being a human being like the rest of us, you've also done some formal and sustained thinking and investigation about the topics we're discussing today.
Yes.
So let's jump right in and talk about existence. In your introduction, you write, "Existence is rarely acknowledged. It is rarely acknowledged because it is rarely sensed." Then you say, "Existence is not only generous, but also, by all reports and without exception, beautiful." So talk about existence. Why begin the book talking about that?
Well, there's a level at which I like to start all my thinking and all my work, which is that it's not often mentioned really, but the truth of the matter is that we human beings have been more or less dropped down here on the planet without any explanation. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We have religious traditions, we have scientific theories, but the raw fact of the matter is that we showed up here without asking to be shown to show up, and that our existence in the first place is sort of a thing that a lot of people, I think, take for granted without really addressing it and really thinking about the fact of our existence in the first place as being completely surprising. And I say beautiful also because I do find the world in all aspects of it to be a beautiful place.
Yeah.
And it seems to be the nature of things, and it's all the way through. You know, it's not just a nice sunset.
Yeah.
But there's a beauty at every level, from the cosmic down to the subnuclear level, that is just completely, it's saturated.
Yeah. I want to have you respond to something else you wrote. You write, quote, "Most religion and science dialogue suffers from people's overwhelming need on virtually all sides of the discussion to be right." You then say this creates an atmosphere that repels those of us who love knowing things, but who have also made peace without knowing things and with mystery. If this book alleviates this situation even a little, then I will be happy and grateful. Say more about making peace with not knowing things.
Yeah, I think that relates to what I said a moment ago. This is just a theory of mine, and I don't have any way of ever knowing if it's true or not, but it seems to me that a lot of people don't really acknowledge the oddness of our existence, as I just described it. Don't really face up to what I think is the fact that, as I said, we just showed up here without any explanation, and we're left to figure it out. That kind of thinking, I think in my experience of talking about things like this, I think that scares people to think of it in those terms. To think about, if you think about evolution, if you think about the big picture, you think about the cosmic history and so forth, it really can be a little bit frightening to really acknowledge it. And I think that in the face of that vastness of our unknowing, of what we don't know, people tend to clamp down on things that make immediate sense.
Yeah.
And that bring them a sense of security in a world in a universe that is anything but that.
Can you pinpoint any parts in your own journey where you got more comfortable with some uncertainty?
Yeah, a couple points. One is when I was very young, and I first read things like Carl Sagan's Contact. We went to church every week. My dad was also a professor at Georgia Tech, and so there was a lot of science books laying around. And once I got sort of a sense of natural history and of astronomy, I think that it really opened up. I never thought there wasn't a God. I never really rejected God as a kid. I just realized that God was a lot bigger and more, I don't know, mysterious than what I was maybe learning in at Sunday school. But also there came a point, maybe you might call it a midlife crisis. It came a bit early for me in my mid to late 30s, where I also went through a real strong, a really heavy personal crisis. And I came out of that realizing that God was not maybe what I thought God was, that God was not just a large invisible person, more or less like you and me, but bigger.
Yeah.
So those are 2 points. Around 10 years old and around 35 to 40 years old is when the two big ones happened for me.
Yeah. In the book, you do indeed share 35 questions that Christians ask you as a scientist, and you provide responses. I want our listeners to hear a few questions. So some of the questions that you get asked: how do you explain the Old Testament story of creation with your scientific methods? Have you furthered your faith through your work as a scientist? Do you think extraterrestrial life is out there? And if so, what is its theological significance? Are our beliefs about God just patterns of neurons firing in our brains and nothing more? What is the multiverse and what does it have to do with God? Do you ever get asked a question and you just say, you know what, I don't know?
Yeah, I do. In fact, I had one for the journal it was a question about the afterlife. And all those questions you just mentioned, I don't have a definitive answer, but I have some thoughts about those questions, and I might have some questions that I might ask in response to those questions. But when it comes to questions of the afterlife, I come up blank. I really do. People say, what about that? What about the end of time, end of the universe? Stuff like that. Sun's gonna burn out. I have no that. I admit in that point that I don't even have a good theory or a good.
Well, you're being honest about how we know what we know and
Right.
and what we don't know.
Yeah, and how we know what we do know. I saw this funny thing on Twitter, I guess a couple of years ago. Like, you get a bachelor's degree and you think you know something. You get a master's degree and you think, maybe I don't know quite as much. And you get a PhD and you can't believe how flimsy the foundation of human knowledge is.
Yeah, the paradox of learning.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
We'll be right back with more Good Faith Reads.
I'm Mitch Randall, CEO of Good Faith Media, and we're proud to announce a Better Way initiative. A better way. People of faith are too often cast as only narrow-minded and fundamentalist. This image is false, so let's not surrender the truth. A better way. This initiative from Good Faith Media will focus people of faith on giving voice to justice, to inclusion, to love. These values define the faith communities so many of us know. A Better Way initiative from Good Faith Media. Go to goodfaithmedia.org and click on Initiatives. There's more to tell.
Welcome back to Good Faith Reads. Today we're joined remotely by Paul Wallace, author of 35 Questions Christians Ask Scientists. I'm Cliff Vaughn of Good Faith Media. Paul, talk to us about communicating faith and science. You write, you speak, you teach physics and astronomy. What communication principles help guide you in this work?
A couple. One is that communication, well, the bottom line is that communication is really hard. It is, you can stand in front of a classroom and say the same thing in 10 different ways and several times repeat those things. And you use as simple language as you can, given the context, and 2 out of 10 get it. It's a miracle that it happens at all. Let's put it that way. Mm-hmm. It is a miracle that it happens at all. But I do believe in, number one, using simple language. If you can explain it, I don't mean the cat sat on the mat, but I mean, non-technical jargon. I mean, non-technical words, no jargon. If you can do that, that's good. But I really do believe in this principle of starting simple. physics is really funny, and I think theology is actually this way too, is that you start off with with Newton's laws, right? Which they're subtle enough, they're tricky enough. There's a couple points that are really tricky, but you can get the average intelligent college student to get it, But then you learn as a sophomore that wasn't quite right, that there's a deeper level to it, and then you learn a series. It gets deconstructed in a sense as you go on, but all the time it's still true. We still use Newton's laws, but they're just limited. They're not wrong. They're just only correct within a certain range of, a certain limits. So I believe in education as a series of constantly refining. What we teach the kids in Sunday school is not what you should be learning when you're 35, and that's not what you should be learning maybe even when you're 60. That I have to be happy. I have to be happy being approximate when I teach, when I communicate, and accepting the fact that it's going to be approximate.
Yeah. By the way, you can learn more about Paul, his work, terrific videos about faith and science at pwallace.net. An important note to all of our listeners, we at Good Faith Media are always accepting book proposals. Our authors engage with an experienced team of editors, designers, and marketers to produce and sell books on a variety of topics. If you have a book proposal you'd like to run by us, head over to goodfaithmedia.org for more information. Last question, Paul, and I might as well go big. Go big. You write on page 92, I am deeply suspicious of all language that makes the Creator seem like a big, invisible person. So, responding with the totality of who you are, who or what is God?
The longer I walk on this earth and the more I live, the less I can simply address that question, because I have less and less certainty of my own. But I do believe that whether or not I can explain God easily, that God is a real thing. And I tend towards what Paul Tillich called God being the ground of being. It's sort of a view that is not easily dissected, but it's one that God as ultimate reality, God as the ground of being, God as God. I will first say that as a Christian, I do believe that God is described more as a person than as a thing. God is more of a personality than God is an object or even so in that sense, you might think of God as a large human being, but I don't think the personality of God is. I think that our personalities are dim reflections of the personality of God, basically. But I actually don't have an answer for you that goes beyond, Tillich's ground of being, or my idea of ultimate reality, and also thinking of it not as a principle or as a set of laws, so much as I think of God as a personality.
Yeah, I love the language you use to communicate about God, and the Tillich quote certainly. So it's a wonderful book. Our guest today on Good Faith Reads has been Paul Wallace, author of 35 Questions Christians Ask Scientists. It's available along with lots of other books at goodfaithmedia.org. Paul, I really love the conversation in the book.
Thanks a lot, Cliff. I appreciate your time.